The calibration tone was already running when Delia Kessler came in through the side door with her toolbox in one hand and a thermos in the other. It rose out of the stage speakers low and smooth, then climbed until it left a pressure behind the eyes. By now she could tell where it was in the sweep without looking. The room took the signal in, held it for its fraction of a second, and gave it back to whatever box in the wings was listening. That was not her job. Her job was the chairs. She set the thermos on a radiator cover near row M, shrugged off her jacket, and looked up at the house. The Civic had been built in 1923 and repaired more often than it had been renovated. The murals on the ceiling were under paint. The chandeliers were gone. A suspended grid of fluorescent panels sat where none of it belonged. The seats were original. 942 of them, red velvet gone brownish in the aisles and brighter where the balcony kept off the sun, each one bolted to an iron standard with a cast foot that had been decorative once and was now only heavy. She had been hired to reseat them before the next renovation, not replace. Reseat. The facilities manager Kerrigan had made that distinction in the first 10 minutes and then again in the last 5, as if Delia might sneak in overnight with a truck and take the whole house. Frames stay. Kerrigan had said, foam comes out. New foam goes in. New velvet if the old tears when you strip it. Half the bolts will be frozen and the other half stripped. 6 weeks. That had been 3 weeks ago. Delia was on row K. The tone paused at the top of its sweep. Delia waited with her hand on the first seat. She had learned not to work during the pauses. They made the hall feel as if it were holding something in its chest. At K14, she pressed a palm to the seat pan before she touched the wrench. The foam gave in the slow, dead way old foam gave when the cells had gone hard and hollow at once. The velvet at the front edge had worn flat where people leaned forward. The right arm cap had a soft lacquer shine from hands. She set the socket on the first bolt and worked it loose. Clean thread. Lucky. The second turned a quarter rotation and stopped. Of course, she said to it. She backed it out, reset the wrench, and put her shoulder into it. The bolt squealed once and came. From where she knelt, she could see the counter only if she leaned back and looked into the left wing. Industrial grey box on the wall beside the old dimmer racks, a row of LED bars that rose and fell while the sweep ran, one small display window nobody had replaced because the archive still used the numbers. Morning and evening, the system measured the hall. The logs went upstairs. Somebody there decided which tapes moved up the digitization queue. Delia knew that much because Kerrigan had told her not to trip over the microphone stands on the first day. She did not know the rest. She thought about bolts. By noon, she had finished 8 seats and moved down the row. When the calibration stopped, the room changed shape. Without the test signal, the quiet grew thicker and less tidy. She ate lunch on the radiator cover and looked at what she had done. From the aisle, row K looked like row L. The difference was in the hands. You felt it before you saw it, the front edge gone down where people leaned into endings. Arm caps polished where they braced themselves through long pauses. Tip-up returns that had lost half a beat because the hinge had worn into its own preference. Delia had worked enough old houses to know that use did not spread itself evenly. It gathered. On Thursday of the 3rd week, a man named Harrelson came down from the archive office with a laptop case and a clipboard. He was older than she expected and careful with the panel in the way of people who had spent too long keeping old systems from becoming decisions for other people. He plugged into a port below the LED bars and watched the screen wake up. "Morning," Delia said. He glanced over. "You're the seat person." "That's what they tell me." He gave her the beginning of a smile and turned back to the panel. The sweep began again. For a while there was only the tone, the click of her ratchet, and Harrelson's fingers on the keyboard. After a few minutes he said, "You know what it measures?" Delia looked up. "The counter?" "Not really." He shut the laptop halfway. "Audience response in theory, not judgment. It listens for how the room answers back, then reduces that to 1 score. Applause meter. a bureaucratic one. And the archive still uses it, along with everything else. He tapped the clipboard against his leg. Rights. Demand. Tape condition. Missing metadata. The score is only one nuisance among several. The suite paused overhead. Pipes ticked somewhere behind the plaster. Does it help? Delia asked. Harrelson looked into the house where she had half a row open and the padding stacked by the aisle. It helps it keep being there, he said. That afternoon she moved from K into J. The house side of J looked ordinary enough from the aisle. The same red gone dull with dust, the same brass numbers in small enamel ovals, the same arm caps with hairline cracks where people had set too much of themselves down too often. Delia pulled one seat, then the next. At J7 she stopped. The difference was not softness. She had handled softer seats. It was not damage. It was arrangement. She pressed the foam again. The front edge had gone down harder than the seats beside it. Both arm caps were polished. The backrest had taken a steeper inward curve. None of that alone was strange. The strangeness was that the seats on either side offered the same hand back to her. She stood and moved along the row. J5 through J12. 8 seats. Same deeper wear at the lip. Same shine on the arms. Same back angle. When she tipped them up and let them fall, even the returns seemed to hesitate in the same place before closing. She looked toward the wings. The counter was dark for the evening. The sweep had ended an hour ago. Work light cut across the row and made the velvet look brown and then red again depending on where she stood. She pressed J7 once more, harder this time, as if the extra pressure might tell her what the first had not. It did not. It only made the seat answer with the same slow practice give. The next morning she came in before the sweep and waited at the back of the house with her thermos uncapped in both hands. When the signal started, the hall took it more plainly than she expected. Low to high. Nothing dramatic in it. A test, not a performance. The LED bars rose in the wing and fell. A strip of paper fed through the little chart recorder bolted below the panel, pale yellow with its edge curling. When the cycle ended, she went straight to row J and sat in J7. The yawl foam took her weight reluctantly. Then it settled around her in a way that almost anticipated where she would put her elbows. The fit was not personal enough to be eerie. It was worse than that. General. Rehearsed. From here the stage looked a little farther away than it had from the radiator cover. The grid where the chandeliers should have been made a second ceiling above the first. Dust moved through the light from the booth like a shoal of something too small to count. Harrelson found her there an hour later. Testing the inventory? He said. Delia stood up. This row is wrong. He looked at the open seats, the stripped foam by the aisle, the new padding waiting in its plastic. How? They're worn together. She put a hand on J7. Front edge, arms, back curve, same on 8 seats. He came down the aisle and set his clipboard on J3. Then he put both hands on J7 the way she had, not elegantly, only carefully. Huh? He said. It was the first useful thing he had said. The panel throws high response here when the hall is empty, he said after a moment. As for years, we flag it as an anomaly and move on. Because of this? Maybe. He moved to J8, then J6. His fingers were lighter than hers, but she could see the same recognition arrive in them. What exactly is it reading? She asked. Harrelson looked toward the wing as if the answer might still be hanging from the rack. Whatever changed. He lifted one seat and let it settle. Compressed foam changes absorption. Worn wood changes what reflects. A loose return gives you a different little tale. Enough small things in the same place, repeated enough years, and the system gets back a pattern it already knows. The sweep began again from the stage. Delia felt it first in the seat standards under her calves. Harrelson stayed where he was, one hand on J7's arm cap, while the LED bars in the wing climbed and dropped. Were the performances good? Delia asked. Probably. He was still watching the panel. Most of the tapes tied to this section are from the same run of years. Same conductor for some of them. Same subscription block, definitely. So people sat here, week after week. He took his hand off the arm cap and looked at the row as if he disliked how reasonable it had become. Long enough to alter the seat, long enough for the alteration to alter the measurement. The sweep ended. The chart paper twitched forward another inch. Does the archive care? Delia asked. About the anomaly? Enough to keep the note in the file. He picked up his clipboard. Not enough to stop using the score. It still has to sort things somehow. He left her there and went back toward the wing. After that, Delia kept noticing where use had gathered. Not just in row J. A pair in the balcony with one arm polished and the other not. 3 seats at the aisle in F with the front lip gone down as if the same impatient bodies had kept rising before intermission was officially theirs. Returns that closed cleanly in one section and dragged in another. She worked through them all. Bolts, foam, fabric, bolts. When she stripped J7, she set the old foam aside longer than she needed to. Once the cover was off, the shape was clearer. The front edge had a long, shallow, scooped-out place, not from damage but insistence. Along the right side, the material had gone smooth where a coat seam or trouser rivet or ring had met it too many times to stay separate. She ran a hand over it once and dropped it in the discard pile. On her last day, she walked the house before Kerrigan came to inspect the rows. Most of the seats were done. New foam, tightened standards, velvet brushed up. The house looked more even than it had any right to. From the aisle, you could almost believe uniformity had been the original condition and age the interruption. At row J, she stopped. The new foam was in. The cleaned velvet had been stretched and stapled back. The numbered ovals shone where she had wiped them. J7 no longer looked different from J6 or J8 unless you put your hand on it and waited. She did. There it was. Not the old collapse. Not exactly, but the seat took her palm with a slight forward favor, the same way it had before, as if the frame beneath the replaced parts had kept its opinion. The sweep started from the stage. Delia sat down before she had decided to. The signal rose through the room, low to high. In the wing, the bars answered. The chair took her weight. The repaired return held open under her knees. For a moment, she could feel both jobs at once, what the room was measuring and what it wasn't. When the sweep paused at the top, she did not move. On her first morning, she had learned not to work during the pauses. They made the hall feel as if it were holding something in its chest. Now, in the brief stop before the tone dropped away and started over, she had her hands on the cleaned arm caps of J7 and could feel how many times other hands had taught them that shape without meaning to. Then the signal went on. Delia stood, picked up her toolbox, and left the row to answer for itself.